Once upon a time, in fact, it was that very time when Napoleon was marching his soldiers up the back of Europe and down the front of Europe, there lived in a very small country called Bavaria, in a very small town called Rutenburg, two brothers named Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Jacob was the older, and he was very, very studious indeed. His head was filled to the top with writing books like a German dictionary. His younger brother Wilhelm was also studious, but not very. In fact, not even very. For half his head was filled with love for his wife, and half his head was filled with love for his children, and half his head was filled with love for all the children in the world, which, when you add it up, doesn't leave much room for dictionaries, does it? No. Now, these two brothers lived in Wilhelm's comfortable house and worked in the beautiful library of a beautiful palace for a not too beautiful duke. To tell the truth, the duke was a very fat, very old, very mean man who yelled especially loud when he found out that Jacob was spending all his time writing a dictionary and Wilhelm was spending all his time writing about dragons and fairies and magic fish, instead of writing a book about the Duke and his family. He hollered and screamed and yelled so loud that all the neighbors could hear him. So, naturally, Jacob ran right home and got right to work, and Wilhelm ran right home and got right into the arms of his children, who were much more important than any old duke. He kissed them and tucked them in and brought them a drink of water and then gave them what he always gave them, a good night story, which started like all bedtime stories should start. Once upon a time, there was a woodsman. He was tall and handsome and dressed almost all in green. He whistled as he walked through the forest and then suddenly stopped in front of a huge tree and knocked. Imagine that. He knocked on a tree. But imagine this. There was a door in the tree, and it was opened by a gypsy. She invited him into her house, which was filled with things to make magic with, and he told his friend he had come to say goodbye, for he was off to try to marry the princess.
Woodsman, I have something for you. No one has ever given me a word of kindness but you. When others have scoffed, you alone have smiled.
Give me one smile in return and I'll be happy.
That you shall have, and something more.
And she handed him nothing. Or was it nothing? No, it was...
Take this cloak of invisibility. It will hide you from men's greed and protect you from their envy.
Will it help me to win the princess?
That you'll never know until you try.
So he put on the coat, and it really did make him invisible. Then he gave the gypsy a kiss goodbye and whistled his way once again through the forest until he came to the king's palace and stood right in front of the king's jester and the king's prime minister and the king's executioner and the king himself. And the woodsman bowed and bowed as the king said,
He bows very well, doesn't he?
Oh, very well indeed. Oh, stop it. That's enough. Who are you? No, let me guess. You are a prince in disguise.
Your Majesty, I'm just a humble woodsman.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, that's marvelous. Oh, a woodsman. That means that you are accustomed to the axe. Ah, to the axe. Ah, to the axe.
Everybody laughed at the king's joke. Well, because if they didn't laugh, he was liable to have their heads cut off. And when they were done laughing, the king and the prime minister read the rules. I mean, you just don't up and ask to marry a princess. You have to win her, and that means following the rules.
The rules.
He who
discovers how my daughter,
walks holes through her slippers every night.
without telling me how she does it. I tell you, another pair every night, it costs me a fortune. Proceed.
He who discovers the why and wherefore.
Gets half my kingdom. Oh, yes, and the princess, too. Now, tell him the bad part.
Whoever shall try and fail.
As all others have tried and failed, shall have his head separated from his body forevermore. Good luck, woodsman. But remember, don't lose your head. Ha! Ha! Oh, don't lose your head.
The woodsman, being very brave, was willing to take the chance. So he went to the bedroom of the princess to stand guard. In a little while she came out, and she was just as a pretty princess should be. And then, because it was a cold night, she gave him a warm drink. A drink which was supposed to put him to sleep. But the woodsman only pretended to drink it, and then pretended to fall asleep. And the princess ran out. Up jumped the woodsman, and putting on his invisible coat, he caught up to her just as she jumped into a carriage. He jumped on the back of the carriage, got a good grip, and off they went. And where did they end up? Why, in a gypsy camp, where everyone was laughing and dancing, including our princess. From gypsy to gypsy she danced, and the woodsman watched. Then off came his invisible cloak, and he put on a mask, and took the princess in his arms, and they danced. They danced the whole night through, and just as she reached to take off his mask to find out who he was, uh-oh, there's the rooster crowing. It was getting late, and she had to be in bed before her father woke up. So quickly she ran back to her carriage, and the woodsman, putting his invisible cloak back on, jumped on the back. Well, it was really a wild ride, as you can well imagine. Up hills and down dirt roads and over narrow bridges where the woodsman almost fell off, and down 1,000 feet, and then back over more narrow roads until they finally reached the palace, where the princess got back to her room, and the woodsman went back before the king himself.
You tried and you failed. How sad. Too bad. Get to work.
Just a moment. Your Majesty, I know how the princess wears holes in her slippers.
I don't believe it. Not a word. Where does she walk?
Well, nowhere. She dances all night.
Fiddlesticks. Alone in her bedroom?
No. She goes through a hidden door and then rides his carriage.
Oh, I've got you now. I know every hidden door, secret room, and sliding palace in the panel. The panel in the panel. Botheration, off with his head.
And the executioner was just about to cut off the woodsman's head when the woodsman showed the king the secret panel in the throne. Of course, inside the king was very happy because he really never liked to have people's heads cut off. So he turned to his daughter and said,
Nobody tells me anything. Now, you see, he guessed your secret every night, dancing and prancing. I'd love to dance, but nobody asks me. Well, a bargain is a bargain, so now we'll have a great big party.
There'll be no party. I shall never marry him.
Tut, 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 my girl. You're not the king. You're only a princess, which isn't as good. Besides, I gave my word.
And last night I gave my heart to a stranger.
And off she ran, but not quite quick enough. For the woodsman put on his mask so she'd know him, and then put the invisible cloak the gypsy gave him around both of them, and they danced off and lived happily ever after. And so they lived happily ever after, which is how a woodsman and a princess should live. However, there was one small problem. Wilhelm's wife, Dorothea, said it wasn't a woodsman at all, but a tailor. Naturally, this had to be straightened out. So Wilhelm went right to someone who was excellent at straightening things out, his brother Jacob.
By the way, you remember the story of the dancing princess? Whom did she marry, a woodsman or a tailor?
A farmer.
A farmer?
An honest, conscientious, hard-working farmer.
Now, everybody knows you can't have a princess marrying just anybody. I mean, she has to marry somebody, either a woodsman or a tailor or a farmer. So Wilhelm went to his good friend who owned a bookstore, and he said it was a fisherman. Poor princess. There she was, a happily married woman, only nobody knew whom she was married to. And no one could even find out. For believe it or not, there wasn't even one book of fairy tales in the whole world. Now, no one thought that was very important. Not Jacob or the Duke who hollered or anybody excepting Wilhelm. And even he wasn't positive, so he asked some children.
Now, don't be frightened. I just want to ask. Do you want a book of fairy tales?
No, sir.
Hup. Of course you do. Why not?
I can't read.
Well, you can hear, can't you?
Yes.
All right, then. Sit down.
And they sat down and got quiet, and then he said, once upon a time, and the time was the day before Christmas, there was an orphanage. Across the street from this orphanage was a tiny shop owned by an old cobbler with snowy white hair and bushy eyebrows, a big thick mustache, and funny glasses. He was the very favorite friend of the poor little orphans, but they were his only friends. Because even though he worked very hard, his customers were never pleased. Why, on this very day before Christmas, the mayor himself said that if his shoes weren't ready for the king's party tomorrow, he would put the cobbler in jail. And a beautiful ballerina said he'd be boiled in oil, and a hunter said he'd be shot. And while he was thinking of all those terrible things, who should come in but the orphans from across the street?
I suppose you're going to the king's birthday party, too.
No. We came to sing for you.
Why?
'Cause you like us.
Do not. Why don't you, get jobs or get married?
Nobody asked me.
Well, then go and see your good luck elf. They handle those things for you.
Orphans don't have good luck elves.
Nonsense. Everybody's got good luck elves. If you don't believe in them, they won't come to you. I'll tell you about it sometime. Now, go home. I'm busy. Very, very busy. Go home.
You do like us, don't you?
Do not.
Do too.
Do not.
You got to. 'Cause nobody else does.
Well, naturally he liked them. In fact, he loved them so much that he decided to make them some good luck elves for Christmas presents. And when he finished making the elves, he tried to start working on the shoes for the mayor and the ballerina and the hunter, but he was so tired that he thought he'd close his eyes for just a second, and before you knew it, he was sound asleep. The whole shop was asleep, excepting a cuckoo clock. And who should it wake up but a good luck elf, the red one the cobbler had just made for the orphans. He woke up the blue elf.
Why?
Why what?
Why am I up?
Ask him.
Said the blue elf, pointing to the green elf. But nobody could answer him excepting the yellow elf, who said,
Because it's Christmas Eve.
Ha-ha! I've got it.
He's got it.
He can have it.
Christmas is the time for good cheer. Good cheer is what we bring because we're good luck elves.
I'd rather be a bad luck elf. Why? 'Cause he gave me a crooked mouth, that's why.
Don't you like your mouth?
No.
Then keep it shut. Unless those shoes are finished by morning, he's in terrible trouble.
Good. Serves him right.
Get to work. Everybody. Begin. Get busy. Commence. Go!
but they just stand there.
What's wrong?
How do you fix shoes? Ooh?
Ah, I know. You cut.
Ooh.
You You glue.
Ow.
You shine.
Ow.
I tack.
Ow. Ow. It's fun to whack with a tack and a hammer. Ow. To whack with a tack and a hammer. Ow. Your eyes light up and your heart goes boom. Ow. 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 To brush some glue on the shoes, what you do for the heel?
For the heel.
For the heel. You brush some glue on the shoe for the heel.
You do get sticky, but gee, you feel.
Ow.
Ow.
Ow, ow, ow. To whack away on shoe. We'll chase a stack of blue. We'll make life cake when you're awake.
And dreamy when you snooze.
Ow. Ow.
Ow.
To shine from the front to the back with a whack and a wham. A wham. From front to back with a whack and a wham.
If that ain't heaven, don't know what am.
Ow. Ow. It's fun to whack with a hammer and crack. To whack with a hammer and crack. Ow. It's fun to whack with a hammer and crack. To whack with a crack from the front to the back. From the front to the back with a hammer and crack. With a hammer and crack. Ow. 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 Ow.
Morning. The sunlight came streaming through the window, and the elves scrambled back to their places just a second before the cobbler woke up, stretching and yawning and rubbing his eyes, and then quickly, taking the elves in his arms, he hurried across the street to the orphanage and placed one good-luck elf at the foot of each orphan for a Christmas present. Then he rushed back across the street, only to be met by the hunter and the mayor and the ballerina.
Pablo, open the door. I need my shoes.
Oh, my dancing slippers, they must be ready.
Cobbler was afraid to say that he had not made their shoes, but he had to.
Well, you see, it's Christmas. And some people, little people, but very, very important people were forgotten. So I decided that since it was Christmas...
But no one was listening, since they were all admiring the shoes the elves had made and paying the cobbler lots of compliments and lots of money, which surprised him a lot, since he couldn't remember making any shoes.
But I didn't. How could I? Maybe I did. I must have. Oh, well.
And he wondered about it all the way to church, where he stopped wondering when he saw all the orphans, their Christmas elves in their arms, crowding around him and singing. And again, everyone lived happily ever after, excepting poor Wilhelm. For when the Duke found out that his book wasn't finished, when he found out that his favorite cousin, Baron Ulrich of Rheinberg, had been left out completely, he hollered and yelled and carried on something terrible. Why, he even stamped his foot so hard it went right through the floor. And he said at the top of his voice so that people could hear it all over town, "If my book isn't finished in time for my birthday, you won't get any money. And you'll starve, and your wife will starve, and I'll take away your house and throw you out in the snow and do other terrible things." And if you want to find out what those terrible things were, just turn over the record. It was too terrible, just too terrible to even talk about. The frightened brothers quickly took a boat up the Rhine River to the town of Rheinberg to learn all about the Duke's cousin, Baron Ulrich. They had so much work to do when they got there, and only one day to do it in, that they divided it. Jacob went right to the Baron's castle, and Wilhelm went right to the church, where he got an armful of papers full of important information about the Baron, without thinking once of children or fairy tales. Why, he did it so fast he even had time to stop and listen to the choir boys.
Ow. 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 Ow.
And he even had time to wonder where they were running off to when they finished singing. So much so that he asked the priest, who said,
Every Friday, long as anyone can remember, the children of Rheinberg have been invited to visit Anna Richter. She tells the most wonderful fairy tales ever heard.
Fairy tales? Is that where they're going?
Only children are invited.
Well, I must be going. You've been most helpful. A million thanks. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
And off ran the children, and Wilhelm ran after them. Up streets and down alleys and over fences, deep into a forest until they got a house. Now, very quietly, Wilhelm crept up to the window, and nobody heard him because it was raining so hard. So he peeked in and saw all the children and heard the storyteller say,
Once upon a time, long, long ago, in a faraway land, there lived a huge and fearful dragon. He was as tall as the tallest tree in the forest. When he walked, it was an earthquake. When he breathed, a forest fire. All the people lived in terror of this monstrous beast, who had invaded their land from no one knew where. For he ate up their crops, devoured their cattle, and carried off all the young children to his lair.
What for?
Dessert.
Oh. Didn't anyone try to stop him?
Of course they did. The king sent north, south, east, and west, offering half his kingdom to anyone who would come and slay this horrible beast. Many came to try and earn the reward, but the dragon sizzled them. Then he frizzled them. Then he gobbled them up, and he picked his teeth with their bones. Now it happened one fine day that two men, a knight named Ludwig and his servant Hans, set out in search of adventure.
They went through the forest with Hans following his master, who sang merrily,
G-O-N. Dragon, a 53-foot monster snorting fire. A 53 or maybe even higher. I heard one thrashing through the forest, crashing, and it seems a smashing day to bag him. A D-R-A-G-O-N. Dragon. Dragon!
And when they reached the cave, Ludwig stepped aside and pushed Hans in. Hans walked slowly and very carefully. Wherever he looked, there were bones and skulls and other terrible things. And finally, he got to the middle of the cave, but he couldn't find any dragon. Therefore, Ludwig got very brave and came into the cave carrying a lance, a sword, and a shield. And he walked right up to Hans and said,
No doubt the filthy beggar took one look at me and realized he'd met his match. Right now, he's probably 100 leagues from here, running for his life.
which was the farthest thing from the truth, for suddenly the pile of rocks began to move and uncurled into the biggest dragon you ever saw. Ludwig the coward dropped his sword and shield and lance and jumped behind the only rock big enough to hide behind. So poor Hans picked up the lance and threw it at the dragon, who caught it in his teeth and spit it away. Then Hans picked up the sword and shield, and the fight was on. First the dragon spit fire, then he swung his tail, and they rushed at each other. And Hans is up now. No, he's down. He's up, he's down, he's... Oh, no. Oh, no. Oh, I can't look. None of us had better look. Just close our eyes and listen. It's quiet. Do you think it's all right to open our eyes? Let's open them and take a look at poor Hans. There he lies. No, it's not a dragon. And Hans has killed him. Now I ask you, have you ever seen or heard of such such a brave man? Of course not.
Master!
What is it?
The dragon is dead.
Dead. Dead?
Are you pretending?
Oh, I stake my life on it.
We can't claim the reward without the creature's head.
Give me the sword.
So, just as though he'd done the whole thing himself, Ludwig grabbed the sword from Hans and swish, cut off his head. Oh, not Hans's, the dragon's. Then later, when Hans wasn't looking, Ludwig took the same sword and killed poor Hans and buried him beneath an apple tree where he slept through winter and summer and fall. And then, one spring, a shepherd happened to be passing the apple tree and found a funny white thing and a flute. So he took out his knife and carved a beautiful flute. Then he sat down to play it. But instead of music, this came out.
Oh, King, pray listen to my tale. I sleep beneath a tree. My master Ludwig raised his sword and drove it into me. I'll never walk the earth again, or hear a bird, or plant a seed, till the man who slew me says he's sorry for the deed.
Well, Sir Ludwig?
Your Majesty, it was an accident. You see, my sword slipped, and poor Hans happened to be directly underneath.
Because it was poor Hans who slew the dragon, and not you, isn't that so? The court will pass sentence.
Wait! Don't do anything hasty. I'm sorry I did it. Truly sorry. Really am.
And as he said that, the magic flute jumped out of the shepherd's hands, and bone after bone after bone appeared, until there was a full skeleton standing there. And then, lo and behold, the skeleton became a very live and a very happy Hans.
Hans, don't let them kill me. If you'll overlook that one little incident, I was always a good master to you.
It's true, Your Majesty. He was a good master. Any bit of old clothing he couldn't use, he'd give it to me. And on a cool, bitter night, he let me sleep next to his nice, warm horse. And any scrap of food his dogs wouldn't eat, he'd let me have 'em. I implore you, Your Majesty, spare his life.
So be it. His life shall be spared.
Thank you, Your Majesty. Well, help me up, Crumpet Face.
Wait. I have not finished. You, Ludwig, shall spend the rest of your life as servant to Hans.
Oh, no!
Come here, my boy. Hans, hereafter to be known as Sir Hans, the Dragon Killer.
Don't you worry, sir. I'll be just as good a master to you as you were to me.
Thank you, Sir Hans.
And they all lived happily ever after. Excepting maybe poor Ludwig, who deserved it anyway. Well, the story was over and all the children had to run home for dinner. And as the storyteller waved goodbye to them, she suddenly felt faint. Wilhelm jumped from his hiding place and helped her, and when she felt better, she told him, just dozens and dozens of wonderful stories. Wilhelm wrote and wrote until it was too dark to see, and then he thanked her and went running back to tell his brother about the stories. But it was so dark he could hardly see, and as though he weren't wet enough from the rain, he ran through a stream and got wet all over again. But finally he got to the dock and found his brother Jacob, found him very angry. For Wilhelm's arms were filled with fairy tales, but he had lost the information on the Baron. And the Duke's book couldn't be finished, and they'd lose their jobs and their house, well, The only thing Wilhelm could do now was to go home alone and admit to the Duke that he, and not his brother Jacob, had messed things up. Being honest and telling the truth would have been enough to satisfy most people, but not the Duke. Oh, no. He started screaming again, and this time louder than ever. And when Wilhelm said he was sick, the Duke just said that he had 3 days to pay the rent or out in the street and into prison. And since Wilhelm was really sick, he did the only thing he could do. He fainted. Yes, he fell right to the floor. So they took him home and called the doctor, who said he was really sick. Poor Wilhelm lay in bed, tossing and turning and moaning, and with a fever so high that he was completely out of his head. And then Wilhelm had a real dream.
Jacob? Dorothea? Who is it?
Is this the residence of Wilhelm Grimm?
I'm Wilhelm Grimm. Who are you?
I'm a giant.
Don't be absurd. There are no giants.
He's a lot sicker than we thought.
We? Who's we?
Some friends of mine.
Go away. I'm dying. Everybody knows it.
You stop that. My friends are pulling at my trouser leg. They want to see you.
Don't want to see anybody. Tired. Very tired.
But the giant paid no attention and filled the room with his friends. Some very famous friends like Cinderella and Hansel and Gretel and Snow White and a funny little man with a funny little hat.
Easy, easy, you overgrown ox. That's him?
Please. Go away. Want to sleep.
You be quiet now. He says he's dying. We must be respectful.
Why? Huh? What, is he respectful?
Please leave me alone.
You see? You see? No respect at all. He's mean and selfish.
You're a nasty little man.
Nasty little man. I am only nasty to them what's nasty to me. And nobody is nasty to me until I'm nasty to them first. And that includes everybody.
He thinks he's clever because he can spin gold out of straw.
Can he really do that?
Stop popping my beard, Richard, and I can't stand the itchy beard.
He has quite a temper, hasn't he?
Yes, and he really enjoys it.
Why, you little pipsqueak, I could crush you under my foot. You, what is your name anyway?
I don't know. What is my name?
How should I know?
You see? Whether we live or die, all he's interested in is himself, and anybody who's only interested in himself is not interested in anybody else, too.
I don't know, but...
What he means, Mr. Grimm, is that our lives depend on you. If you die...
We will never be born.
You promised if I brought you along...
But I'm so tired. I have no more life left in me.
Well, if you're gonna die, the least you can do is give us names.
Please, Mr. Grimm, would you?
Well, since you're no bigger than my thumb, we'll call you Tom Thumb.
Tom Thumb? Tom Thumb! Hooray, I got a name! Tom Thumb!
Your face is dirty.
It's from cinders.
Then you should be called Cinderella.
Cinders? Oh, I like that very much, Mr. Grimm. Thank you. And I?
You're white as snow. You're Snow White.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm. Thank you, Mr. Grimm.
Hansel,
Hansel?
Gretel,
Griff!
This is easy. Your little Red Riding Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Grimm.
What about me? You forgot about me? Don't I get a name?
Rumple. Stilts. Kim.
What? Well, that's ridiculous. Well, who ever heard of such a name? Rumple, Rumple. What does it mean, anyway?
I can't see you.
All things die differently, Mr. Grimm. We die like dreams, fade into forgetfulness.
No. Don't. You mustn't.
We haven't much more time. When you reach your last heartbeat, we reach ours.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye, Mr. Grimm.
Goodbye. And thank you, Mr. Grimm.
Tell them to come back. Tell them.
Only you can call them back. Only you.
Wait.
Only you.
Don't leave me.
Only you.
Where are you?
Only you.
Where have you gone?
Please come back. Please.
And as he tried to reach them, out of bed he fell, and his wife and his brother rushed upstairs and into his room. And there he was, lying on the floor, sound asleep and smiling. His wife felt his head, and the fever was Wilhelm Grimm was all better. In fact, better and strong enough to go back to work. And together with Jacob, they not only did all those important books like the dictionary, they even managed to collect dozens and dozens of fairy tales and put them into a book which they called Grimm's Fairy Tales. One day, Dorothea told the Grimm brothers that they had an important visitor from Berlin, a very famous man who told them that the king himself, not just an ordinary duke, but His Majesty Wilhelm III, King of Prussia, had sent a message, a most wonderful message, saying that they had been elected to membership in the Berlin Royal Academy, and that the induction ceremony was to take place in Berlin. Thereupon he handed a very important-looking scroll to Wilhelm to read.
In recognition of the literary and scholarly excellence of the German grammar, Serbian grammar, legal antiquities, Grimm's law of consonants, Latin poetry.
Which made everybody happy excepting Wilhelm. And when his brother asked him why he wasn't overjoyed, he said,
It's just that there's no mention of the fairy tales.
Imagine that. Of all the wonderful things they had written, the one Wilhelm thought was the most wonderful was not even mentioned. Well, there was nothing to do but pack up and take the train to Berlin. But on the train, Jacob was very angry, even angrier than the Duke had ever been. And as he practiced the speech he was going to give to thank everyone for the wonderful honor, he started it off like this.
Members of the Academy, I'm deeply grateful for this honor, which, I regret to say, is an outrage.
It's your day. Stop resenting it.
Look, whatever work we performed equally. Whatever honors are received, we should share equally.
We're being honored for your work, not mine. Oh, you were right about the fairy tales. They were a waste of time. Oh, quick reading, quickly forgotten.
Never mind that. It is an outrage. And in my speech, I'm going to tell them
Jacob, just tell them that I'm your brother.
Finally, the train arrived in Berlin. They got off the train and were met by a very distinguished man who said, "The Berlin Royal Academy welcomes you, and..." But they never heard the rest of what he had to say, for like magic, hundreds of children came rushing into the station, all of them shouting at once.
Just tell them I'm your brother.
Once upon a time, there were two brothers.
Two brothers, Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, who lived happily ever after, as did all the children from that time until now and forever and ever, who read the stories that start once upon a time and end, they lived happily ever after.